was to battle China, that China would lose. We don't know that white supremacy is superior to China from a war standpoint. Do we? Do we have evidence of that? And if so, as we're in a court system of law, what is your evidence to substantiate that?
Whenever the people who are classified as Chinese and are non-white peoples under the system of white supremacy, now they are either under the system of white supremacy or they are not. I have no way of proving this because only the white supremacists really know for sure. I can only speculate, me as Neely Fuller, who is making these statements. But until it is proven different, because a lot of people down through the history of white supremacy have thought that they had a lot of muscle and they got a rude awakening, sometimes through some type of scientific methods. I mean, certain type of weapons suddenly appeared from nowhere. Bombs that people had never even probably just speculated might exist somewhere out there, or a theory that it might exist, have actually shown up at the crucial moment. So the white supremacists also are the masters of secrets. So they will put out feelers. I mean, they will put out little scenarios where people will begin to flex their muscles, you might say, non-white people, thinking that they have some muscle, just like black people in the so-called ghettos. They get a few 9mm and a few AK-47s, and they begin to run around and kill a few other black people and whatnot, and they think that they're somehow king of the block, or that they have neighborhoods where they call it their turf and all like this, and they're so nonsensical as to not have any idea of how big this world is and how much muscle the white supremacists have, even in giving them their 9mm and their AK-47s.
So it sort of reminds me of what happened with Saddam Hussein, if I can use that as an example, where here's was a guy that, at least by all reports, appeared to think that he had something, he had muscle that he really didn't have. And so he was led to believe that he could really stand up and deal with something, and then when the real deal went down, he was obliterated. Is this an example of what you're talking about?
As long as white supremacy has existed, the white supremacists themselves make it their business to see to it that some of their victims, some of their non-white people out there, will be led to think that they are growing in strength, that they have actually reached a certain plateau where now they can take on their masters. And the white supremacists like to play these little games so that they can slap them down sometimes in one day. In one day, they can obliterate all of them. They won't know what hit them. And then they go walk around stunned, said, well, we miscalculated.
Neely, stay right there. Stay right there. More to come with Neely Fuller on This is Khari. Does white supremacy really exist? With the election of President Barack Obama, we're supposed to be living in a post-racial state. At least that's what some of the sociologists are saying. Is it true, or is it a falsehood? Joining me is Neely Fuller, the author of 2 books that are very, very powerful on the question of race, color, and racism. Number 1 book is The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a bestseller. And the other one just came out, is the Compensatory Counter-Racist Codified Word Guide. Mr. Fuller, in the last segment, we were discussing this notion of China. We were discussing this notion of Japan, of India, and all of these nations which are supposed to be the most powerful economic engines right now in the world. Then we got into a discussion of military might based on your statement, and you were going to conclude a sentence. I want you to pick up right there and go ahead and conclude what you said. I've got another point I want to make once you finish that. Go ahead, Mr. Neely Fuller.
Yes, and one thing that I want to say, I often make this illustration. The white supremacists like these type of what they call war games because they are warlike people. They believe in destruction. They believe in building up to tear down. They are experts in building things. They build things very well. And then they come along 15 minutes later and say, okay, I built it. I can tear it down. Mm-hmm. And so they'll do that. So they build up people the same way. Sometimes they will arm their slaves, so to speak. Or they will feed their foxes, you might say. I sometimes give that illustration. It's like a fox hunt. They have the fox. The fox is there in a cage. They will feed the fox. They will nurture the fox. If the fox looks like it's getting a little sick or something like that, they will nurse the fox back to health. And then on a nice spring day, they will say, okay, turn the fox loose. And they will watch the fox disappear into the forest. And then they'll say, okay, saddle up, boys, and let's go get him. And then they will take off after the fox, and they might show a little mercy when they catch the fox and put it back in the cage, or they might decide to club the fox to death, or they might decide to shoot the fox. And then they all break out the grog and the rum, and they say, that was a wonderful day for hunting. And they do their non-white people the same way. They build them up to tear them down. That's if they build them up at all. Sometimes they don't build them up at all. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they just kind of hold them in abeyance, like whole millions of people are just starving every day.
Like what's happening traditionally in Africa in the last 4 or 500 years.
All the time. Some people are dying by the thousands in what we call Africa all the time. Mm-hmm. And the white supremacists go and take a look and photograph them and all like that, like they would a bunch of animals and whatnot. And they ride around and say, well, the people look like they're in kind of pitiful condition and whatnot. But we don't want them to completely disappear, so we'll give them just enough to get by on. And of course, keep them squabbling among themselves, keep the tribes fighting each other and all like that. And that's excellent entertainment. I mean, it's like a fast forward of the Roman Colosseum scenario, which is what they always worship, always talk about, put it in their history books and whatnot. I mean, the Colosseum is the one thing that we want to preserve as remembrance of what we are all about, what we really pay attention to. Sure, we made aqueducts and all like that back in ancient days for carrying water and whatnot, but the main thing we really want to remember is the Colosseum concept, where you bring in all your slaves and watch the lions eat them up for your entertainment, because ultimately that's what white supremacy is about.
And that's my next question. What is the purpose of white supremacy? I mean, why would anybody set up a system like this and continue to operate it?
Somebody got the notion that it is an excellent idea, that rather than have a universe that's dominated by justice, meaning guaranteeing that no person is mistreated, and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help, why not just set up a universe where we pretend to be planetary gods? And even if we don't really believe it ourselves, let's pretend, and let's set up a system on that model. Now, in order to be that, you have to be lorded over someone. If you're going to be a lord, you have to lord it over some people. So we will pick out some people, and we will do it on the basis of color. And if you're classified as white, you will be in the lord class. And now you'll have some disputes among yourselves, like Corleones and Barzinis. I mean, mobsters always have disputes among themselves. But that doesn't help the people up in Harlem, you might say.
Okay, so, but Neely, some would say that analysis, if you look at slavery, for example, chattel slavery, is I guess that's a prominent term used for it, that's been eliminated. They would come back and say, well, desegregation, that's been eliminated. And they would say that as a result, all of the apartheid, that's been eliminated. So they would say, well, wait a minute. All of the forms of legalized or institutional racism have vanished. So